Good evening. Welcome to the June 16th, 2026 Parks and Public Works Committee. This is uh, Chairman Kat Cotton with council members Dan Murphy, Brian Holloway, Mayor Mayhew's here this evening. We have our executive assistant, Rebecca Solom, Parks and Public Works Director Jeff Hamlin, and Project Manager Dylan Gamble, as well as Andrew taking care of our IT for us today. So we'll call the meeting to order, and first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Concerns with that?
Concerns.
Okay, we consider that approved. Then we move on to public comment. No online public comments will be taken. I do not see anybody out in the audience this evening. So I'm going to be closing public comment. Moving on to approval of the minutes. There is one Scribner's error that we need to correct, and the minutes are for June 2nd, 2026, not June 1st. So that's the only mistake I saw. Anybody have any other concerns?
I have no concerns.
All right. Then we're going to be moving on to some very exciting agenda bills. And yes, Mayor.
Just to be clear, are the minutes approved subject to that correction, or
Right.
did you want them back? Yeah,
Nope.
approved subject to that correction.
Yes.
Thank you.
I thought, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I stated that.
Just wanted to be sure.
Okay. All right, first up, Agenda Bill AB 26-036, approval to execute the Sandy Cove contract. This agenda bill comes amidst a little history, and also we have some bad news and good news, or good news, bad news, good news, which is that finally, after a delay of over 2 years, this was project phase 1 was done in 2023 for the folks not here on the Public Works. And unfortunately, what was to be a follow-up a year later was delayed by the feds. The Army Corps of Civil Engineers put a hold on us for a bit till we could get their approval. But unfortunately, with that delay, some supply chain issues, costs have gone up, and so we are now over budget, about $1.6 million. But the other good news is that administration, the mayor assured me that the budget gap has been closed, and the city staff will present us with how that was done, and as the information wasn't in our agenda packet. All right, so sorry, Dylan, if I stole all your thunder there.
No, no. I guess to pick up that mantle, I would just add that, actually maybe I don't. I want to leave your introduction. Do you guys have any questions before I kind of go over anything? Do you want me to give a general overview of the project as well as the scope of work? How would you like me to proceed? Maybe is my request.
I think a little background and overview, even just for my benefit, would be great, if you wouldn't mind that.
Absolutely. So, Sandy Cove's bank stabilization effort is to protect the park and the other infrastructure that's kind of really adjacent and next to the park. So think stormwater, but in theory, if the erosion was substantially worse, it could start to impact other things as well. But think stormwater for the sake of this project right now. The intent here is to stabilize that where the grassy bank is down to where the river is. As you can imagine, we get different flood events. That river comes up at different points, and it definitely has a substantial eroding impact, and that erosion is what we're seeing. That's the stabilization effort that we're trying to produce to correct that impact and protect the park. That's the kind of general overview, just really fast and a quick elevator pitch, so to speak. The longer term view is that we've been working on since a version of this since 2015. It's pretty complicated to actually identify exactly what the scope is for an in-water work and riverine riparian project such as this. And so the scope can change. Permitting is very intensive, as Councilmember Cotton was indicating. It can have quite the layering of effects and review and re-review and back and forth. And while it is great effort in engineering and interest, it is also complicated and expensive. And there's a lot of different considerations that are kind of built into this. In addition to that, you mentioned the phase 1 effort that we did. We did that back in 2023. The intent is to hold the bank where it was. So as we had it with a bit of extra. So I think we were going to hold the top of the bank. We were going to correct that slope so that we weren't going to see further cutting away at the bottom, the toe of the bank, and losing more and more of our grass, right? So we did this phase 1 temporary, hoping to hold this out until we could get the permitting in place to do what we're now proposing with this contract. That effort, I would say, was largely successful, but I would definitely say that if you were to go out there today, you'll see why it was temporary. The design was not intended to live for 10 years, 5 years. 3 years was a push, and we're starting to see that unraveling of the infrastructure as it is. That's just a way of saying that is how quickly impacting that riverine reach is. If we even have a temporary armoring structure that is facing these impacts, imagine if we had done nothing, we would have probably seen significantly more loss. Now, what exactly, I do not know. So yeah, that's the baseline of it. I can get into the permits and why is permits, which ones. I don't imagine that's a very exciting conversation. So I'd rather hear from you all what is best information to hear.
I think that the last I was aware, correct me if this is not right, is that we've lost 150 feet of the bankment. Is that right?
It's really depending on where you look. So that's we have a bank line that's pretty long, right? So we're seeing erosion across the whole thing.
Right.
And
gone down.
And when you lose trees, you lose a pretty substantial. I mean, you lose the whole, circumference of the tree plus the
The
root
root,
wad that
yeah.
goes with it. So recently we saw that cottonwood went down. It was the radius of the tree would have been 2 feet, but the radius of the root wad was 8 or something like that. So when it goes down, it takes a whole bunch with it, and then it pretty much destabilizes a bunch of the soils nearby, and we see that erosion as well. The main erosion that we have been seeing has been further downstream from the entrance. When you come down into Sandy Cove Park, you come down like a gravel road. A lot of the erosion has been further north, so we're downstream, kind of towards where it's starting to turn left. It's a little hard to give you visuals without pulling up a map, but if we need to, I'll get there.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff.
Well, I'll say that, so when we started the project back in 2015, we had already started losing embankment. And at that point, I don't know how much we had lost, but since we've been tracking it in places we've lost, it's receded over 60 feet. And I think
Okay.
it's up to about 70 feet now.
Okay.
And we have lost a substantial amount of the park. Luckily, when we started the permitting process, we had a survey done, and we applied for permits back then that essentially vests us to that condition, so that we can rebuild the embankment back to the place where we were
Oh.
when we did the initial survey. So we will be putting embankment back on
Okay.
with our restoration improvements as well.
And also, this can only be done during a certain small window of time
That's correct.
coming up upon us.
Yeah, if you would like, I can get into some of the details there. That is actually a really important feature of this. So we are restricted in our weather, we'll call it the weather window, but it's more of a fish passage window or a negative impacts to fish. So we are limited to July 15th to September 30th with a couple of may we please change this extensions if the weather is if we're not dealing with flooding in early October, they would consider giving us an extension. But that's already a very limited window given the tonnage of material that we're talking about moving and driving up and down that ramp. So
What's the anticipated duration of the actual project? I mean, does it fit in that window as long as there's no delays?
Nearly all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm confident they can do it. It's not particularly difficult. It's just a lot of material,
Mhm.
that needs to be moved.
Yes, Councilmember Martin.
After this is all said and done, are we all, I mean, obviously erosion's a constant issue, especially at a location like that. Does this at least buy us time where we're not going to have to be in there or have to, have it be as urgent a priority? Does this get, or are we constantly going to be up against an erosion issue where we're just kind of sinking more resources into something like this?
No, this will stabilize the park. This will have, you can't guarantee riverine environments, right? Because they're dynamic. And so it's difficult to guarantee. However, the techniques that we're using here are well proven. And so it's a 50-year design life. I'm fairly certain that the park will be here in 50 years. It'll still be there. The areas around the park, I can't guarantee because they're not hard. There is revetments around, but some of those revetments are old. They're over 50 years old and they're crumbling. Right. The techniques we're using are a little bit more robust than just basically piling up rocks on the shoreline like we've done in other places. So these improvements will last. They likely will not be the problem, but we will continue to experience erosion along the river throughout the city in other places.
Okay, I'm coming back in 50 years to see how this held up. So.
Okay, so that analysis pretty well said what you're proposing is not a for sure bet. The river's gonna do what the river's going to do. Okay, so understand this is not a for sure bet. Further, I'll put on here, there was always the option of the high bank is the new bank. And again, the river's going to do what the river's going to do. So this project is projected to be 50%. I haven't done the math, roughly 50% over what its budget would be. What projects are being moved out to make room for this?
So this one is a bit more complicated because we have a separate agenda bill that's not packaged as this with this project, but this is a more complicated conversation in attachment to that agenda bill relating to how interfund loans work, and it's a little out of my wheelhouse, I should say.
So I will mark a correction. There's no new budget found here. There's a financing method found here. We don't print money.
Right.
This will eventually have to come from the taxpayers in some form or another. There's a method of shift that we'll talk in F&A of shifting some funds around to cover this. Okay, so, but there's been no steps to mitigate. Have you done value engineering on the design and what scope can be reduced to bring this back closer to budget?
Yeah, so the answer is we've done value engineering throughout the whole process essentially, and we got to this scope of this based on the limitations of the permitting structures that we have and the outcomes that we need to get in terms of stabilizing the bank and achieving the outfalls for the stormwater system. The combination of those goals plus the permitting requirements is more or less what led us to the scope that we have proposed here. So it's a complicated way of saying we have been arguing about this back and forth, trying to control scope with permitting agencies for years. And that is the complexity of the system that has got us here. So is that a perfect counter to other projects? I don't think it is, because this one is maybe unique in its permitting process and complexity. However, it did go through a significant revision and counter revision. Alternatives analysis were done several times. Design reviews of, so we have had several versions, variations of this project to look at what is permittable, allowable, fundable, feasible. It's been pretty extensive, to cap it shortly.
Councilmember Holloway, have you folks, and my apologies because I haven't paid attention to the F&A agenda, but have you folks specifically discussed this with Director Boutte?
No,
Okay.
this is a discussion to come.
Okay.
The mayor has his hand up.
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, so let me try and help kind of explain that. Councilmember Holloway said it exactly correctly. And to answer the question you just had, there has been no previous discussion of this question at either F&A or at this committee. So these questions are the questions you would one would expect you would naturally ask at this point. So let me try and give a succinct answer to Councilmember Holloway's question, which is basically how are we going to, if you're over budget, how's that going to get paid for? So if you think about how we do our utilities capital budgeting, what we do is every 2 years, we do a rate study. The rate study looks out 6 years. When it looks out, well, 6 years. To some degree, it looks out farther, but let's say it looks out 6 years. And so what it looks at is what are the operating costs, which is not the majority of the utility costs. And then it looks at the capital costs, which is the majority of the utility costs. And looking out at those costs, it then comes up with rates that would be needed to cover those operating and capital costs. We relook at that every 2 years. And what happens is we add 2 more years on to the back end, more projects. We also look at what happened during the 2 years, the first 2 years of that 6-year lookout. And what we'll find is that contracts we plan to do in 1 year, we might have in fact done a year later. Sometimes we pull things forward. For example, when we see a contract where we say, you know what, if we combine this with another contract that we thought we'd do in the second year, actually put those together, we're going to get a better outcome. So there's a little bit of shifting in the timing. So what happens is at the time of the rate study, that's our best plan. It's what we think will happen as of the time that we go into that rate study. And that determines the rates. Then the council then sets a rate schedule for the next 6 years, but adopts rates for the next 2 years. And that goes into the budget, that actually gets passed. So what the answer then succinctly to Councilmember Holloway's question is, we have found movement in the schedule such that we can pay for this project, including its overrun, within the 2 years. But the overage will basically get rolled into the next rate study and get spread across the next rate study as a higher construction cost that then needs to be factored in. It'll be net of other things that are getting moved, up or back. But so there's noise in there, if you will. But the amount that this is over budget, basically the simple answer is it rolls into future rates. Now, when you do that, that means that in essence, that overage amount is sort of spread over 6 years, because that's the amount of these 6 years. By the way, I meant to also say, once you've done the rate study and that has that plan for 6 years of capital expenditures, that gets picked up and put in your appropriation for capital, and that's what you appropriate. So you're appropriating what's in the rate study. That's what you've authorized to have happen. Then we come back to you for contracts to actually do that, and that's what's happening now. So just to repeat, the answer to Councilmember Holloway's question is the overage gets rolled into the next rate study because we got enough cash to get there. We're fine on that. But the actual overage will build into future rates.
So this is stormwater capital?
Yes.
Yes, Mayor.
Just as a reminder, and I know this always confused me when I was on the council, but we do our rate studies by the 3 utilities, but just for what it's worth, legally, it's one utility. So there's a one, utilities capital fund. That's just the mechanics of it. But Councilmember Holloway's question is right on. We do think about it. So this 1.7 million, is that the overage? Am I?
You're close, yes.
Yeah. That overage will indeed go into the wastewater?
Stormwater.
Stormwater calculation. So that's exactly right. As you think about how is it that we're getting through till the next rate study, it's because we look at that whole capital fund for all 3 together.
Mhm. Yes, Councilmember Murphy.
Can you just, we don't need to drill all the way down, but I'd love to get a little bit more from you guys on the overage and the reason for that. And we mentioned the regulatory elements, and if we could just I just need a little bit more on that just to better understand why we were at one budget and now we're at now we're in a different place. So if you could just give me a little bit more detail around the reason for the overage and some of the regulatory moving targets that may have occurred.
Okay. I think I can, but I need to ask a clarifying question about which way you want to go here. Do you want me to discuss timing of like bonds and the debt that the utilities have and how that plays a role? Or do you want me to explain how we got to the price of this project?
The second, price of the project, yeah.
Okay, the price of the project.
Yeah.
So the price of the project is a estimated based on like an engineer's estimate that we have as the best case scenario when we came up with the project previous to the CIP going into play.
Pre-engineering.
Yeah, I'd say a pre-engineering estimate. Sorry, sometimes the phrasing there. Engineer's estimate's a thing we pair with our bids that is used by the construction companies to guesstimate the price. They take that and run with it, right? So what we had here in terms of costs is there's a couple parts going on. One is what is the project doing over the course of time, and what did we think we were going to be able to achieve at the time we gave the price? So when we came up with our estimate on how much it was going to cost, that was the best estimate at the time that we thought it was going to be, but we, in a sense, did not have the full picture of what permitting, the decay impacts to the park, inflation, and all these other factors that you could imagine had a role in how the project would finally come out to. And to be frank, still the price of the project, even from the engineer's estimate, which we knew before we knew the bids, was still inaccurate because I really don't even know the capacities of the companies they're going to put bids in and how, what they have different equipment that they own that, is better for them. It's cheaper for them to just operate rather than renting. And that has them with a competitive advantage to other companies. And those types of like outcomes are very hard to anticipate. And that's why we get bids that come in such a range of pricing. So those are some of the factors that lead to why there's a discrepancy.
What was the engineer's estimate?
Engineer's estimate was 4.1 to 5.1. So project came in bid at 3.4.
Got it. And then from what you mentioned earlier, did the Army Corps have some sort of requirements that have changed over the course of the project? And if so, how did that factor into into some of this change?
Nobody wants to touch it.
There was several things that have made this thing, have drug out the permitting process for years, right? Part of it is, frankly, to do with the tribes. And so there is a concurrence element to the permitting so that the tribe can hold up the permitting process until you work through this fairly long process. I think we've done extensive review and meetings with the tribe to make sure that they're on board with what we're doing and that they're accepting of our improvements. But it definitely drove up the cost. We ended up having to do additional things because of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
No, I mean, just other than, again, one option has always been the high bank. And I've warned that if this project goes too far in its dollar figure, I'll go for the high bank. And guys, we're there. We have not mitigated the cost on this project. You're 50% above your budget. We didn't. 50% is, I have a hard time with that, okay? I'll just leave it at that. So I'm not sure that we've done the full homework on this. Mark will be there next year if there needs to be more time to review this. But if you want to ask me to do this overpriced or figure out something else, my vote is to figure out something else. We are in a situation, we just spent the whole retreat that we are in a budget situation. And I'm looking for reactions along those lines and I'm not getting them, guys. So, but even then, when we did that initial study, this gets too expensive. A high bank looks fine. So
Councilmember
that's just
Speak.
my position on it.
I have similar heartburn with respect to the $1.6 million in appropriation requested. And I think obviously wanting to, whatever comes out of F&A on the financing method will be something we'll take a look at. But I just, again, I guess echo Councilmember Holloway's perspective. I think the budget situation is definitely giving me heartburn. And the numbers are giving me a lot of heartburn in terms of that. It's a big number. So again, when this comes, in terms of the financing, when that comes before the full council, having a good look at that. But yeah, this makes me nervous.
Yes, Mayor Mayhew.
Yeah, just maybe to give a little more color on the financing side of this. The financing is a much more complex topic. It's not just about this project. And it's not just about the overage on this project. The overage on this project changes nothing in the financing, and I'll just briefly touch on why. So whether you were to approve this project, not approve this project, or approve it for some other amount, that doesn't make sense, we have a bid, but it doesn't change the financing. Here's why. Over in F&A, you remember I talked about the 6-year plan talks about sources of revenue, and it talks about the uses, operating costs and the capital costs. Over on the sources, it was built into the assumptions that there would be a bond borrowing in 2025 that did not occur. That bond financing would have provided funding for things in both 25 and 26. That didn't happen in 25 because some of the projects planned for 25 did not happen. And so the thought was, well, let's not go out for the borrowing now, let's save a year of interest. But in 2026, we have a whole set of things, including this project, but a whole set of things, a total of about $5 million in projects that need funding because we didn't borrow them last year. So it was the council approved plan to borrow that money. So what we're saying now is in 2026, okay, let's borrow the money so that we can do the projects. And then there's a mechanism by which we're going to propose to avoid some transaction costs and have a win for the city in another way. So there's a financing thing, but I guess from my perspective, when I think from a Parks and Public Works perspective, got a whole bunch of projects we need to fund. We didn't fund them last year, so there's a funding proposal. Let's fund them this year. The point is that goes through regardless. Sorry, that is needed regardless, because there's other projects that are involved. With respect to this project, then, that really is independent of that financing mechanism and what the F&A will look at. And then the full council, assuming it gets sent forward. So I think you're able to make a standalone decision on this project, and it really doesn't impact that other decision. You would just know that if you go forward with this, there's a funding mechanism that F&A will look at. If you don't go forward with this, there's still a funding mechanism that goes forward, but F&A will be able to handle that either way.
Yes, Councilmember.
Will this, I guess, a question for the administration, will this advance, it's a separate agenda bill to AB 2634, which is the budget amendment, or will they be somehow conjoined or combined?
Yes, Mayor.
So this is a contract, or sorry, this is a request for you to authorize a contract.
Mhm.
The 1.7 million of overage requires an additional appropriation. So if you were to authorize now, and just so you wonder, wait a minute, isn't that upside down? Doesn't the first have to happen before the second? Just so you know, at council, you do the ordinances first. So the funding mechanism actually happens before you would vote on this item if this were to advance to council. But in that ordinance, there are a number of things that are being done all at once. So if you, for example, were to decide, no, we don't want to authorize this additional 1.7 million, what we would do is that F&A probably, they would just go into that ordinance, which is the budget amendment ordinance, and just strike that line. So the budget ordinance would be brought down because you would not be therefore authorizing this additional expenditure at this time. And then then in the future, at such time as you are ready to authorize this contract at whatever level you authorized it at, we would then bring in just a standalone appropriation adjustment just for that amount. So right now it's bundled with some others, but that's easily struck out and brought separately. Did that answer your question, I hope?
Did, yeah.
I would certainly like to see this go forward as a project. Not particularly fond of the high bank, but I would like to have some discussion with the rest of council as well. And I would certainly say to see it go forward through F&A and come to the full council with some enlightenment also from the finance department. And, you know, just get the rest of the group's input on this. Thoughts on this?
No, I get no objection, except there's no enlightenment from finance. You have a project which is 50% over budget. You either approve or disapprove. I'll forego the fact that it has come before us without funding identified, but we'll fix that in the next meeting. So yes, it is kind of this way in my head, but we'll fix that in the next meeting. And at least have a mechanism to handle this and the other projects in the interim prior to the bond.
Yeah.
Okay, it's more the F&A will talk a mechanism of how to handle these projects assumed to be bonded but not yet bonded, or this overage, and how much we exercise that mechanism is dependent upon us.
Well, I'd certainly like, yeah, I'd like to learn more about the bonding that got pushed off a year. As far as,
It's pretty well, as the mayor said, the
Yeah.
projects weren't done.
Well,
We
as
didn't
far
need the
as-
money, we didn't bond.
with the other projects and, you know, the amounts and things like that, that's what I'm looking for, is more information on the big picture.
Okay, I mean, we can do a review of the CIP plan, the utility CIP.
So definitely non-consent. But let's move it forward. Yes, sir.
There's no way to prepare a complete review of the CIP with you in this
No.
timeframe.
Not for, just sometime in here.
Yeah, fine. Yes, absolutely. Of course. No, yes.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I guess I'm confused by something. You mentioned, Councilmember Holloway, the high bank solution. Can you explain what that is?
The
Because I'm
analysis
not
al-
familiar.
The analysis always showed that
Parking lot.
it was, up to there's the bank, there's the park, and then there's the bank going up to the.
The high
parking
bank,
lot.
yes, I'm very familiar with the
Okay.
high bank.
The, kind of the question is, which is the real boundary of the river? Is it that high bank or is it that low bank? And the analysis kind of said, it's not a for sure thing that we can really protect the park even with this project. Okay, again, river's gonna do what the river's gonna do. So there was, and it's how much you willing to pay for that park to maintain it, or
Okay,
Do we
so
still-
let me clarify something because I think there's a misconception here. If we're doing the high bank, so if you let the park go and we do another project later on to protect the high bank, that is a much bigger and more expensive project than what we're considering doing here. That is, by that point, we've lost the park and we are starting to worry about infrastructure along the high bank. And so we're actually going to be building something, a significantly larger and more substantial revetment than what we're talking about here. So the price
show me that in the prior analysis.
is not in the prior analysis because
Okay,
we didn't do that. We didn't propose to do that. It would not make sense to do that unless we were seriously considering, letting the park go. So we didn't even cost that.
Okay, you and I may have a different interpretation of history.
I'm a river engineer. I'm kind of involved, I've been involved with this project since the beginning. And I don't remember, this topic coming up like that. So I'm just confused and I'm trying to make sure that we are working with the same and consistent, correct set of information. That's all.
Thank you, Director. All right. All right, let's move on to our next agenda bill, which is AB 26-031. Approval of to execute capital program contracts.
Chair,
And,
Mayor's got.
yes, Mayor.
Sorry, I was unclear what your disposition of that agenda bill item was. Are you sending
Yes.
it
I said we would
forward, or-
Send it forward, non-consent and through F&A, obviously, and then.
Well, this item would go straight from this committee, this agenda bill, the contract for
Right.
this item.
Council non-consent.
Council non-consent was what.
Got it. Thank you. I just didn't catch that. Sorry.
Oh, this is actually the question that I had. Because on the capital programs contracts in Exhibit A, there was the one contract with Lakeside Industries Agreement for the 718 plus thousand. And then for, there was a unspecified contractor in a second contract from the 26 urban forestry improvements for Thompson Avenue. So the question is, if I may finish, whether this was going to be something through Parks and Public Works as has previously done, or if it was going to be actually going out to bid and what the amount would be. So I'm assuming that this $406,266 is the requested for that particular item, sir?
So we knew that the bid opening was today. And so at the time we sent out this on Friday, we did not know what the bid would be. But we knew we would know by the time you had this meeting. So we filled in everything in the agenda bill with the exception of the amount and the contractor name. And then today, when we opened the bids, we found the lowest responsive bidder and put in their name and the dollar amount, and that's the revised item you have. But the purpose was to allow you to address this on a timely manner rather than having to wait another 2 weeks.
And
As a reminder, every one of these bids has a 30-day clock on it once we open it.
who's the contractor?
It is RW, RW Lockwood.
So this is not something we can do in-house then with urban forestry? Okay. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Project Manager Campbell, with any other information you want to provide?
The breakdown, this is two different programmatic works. One is oftentimes called the Urban Forestry Improvement Program, sometimes called the Street Trees Improvement Program. That's the RW Lockwood contract that you have there. I believe you heard this at the last council meeting, or maybe the last Parks and Public Works Committee meeting about street trees, and specifically looking at Thompson Avenue. So this is the Thompson Avenue work. The bids did go out last month, and then we opened them this morning, as the mayor stated. And we did actually get several bidders. We got 5 and quite a range. And this is our lowest responsive bidder after we reviewed the bids. And a very similar situation for the other contract that's associated with this agenda bill, which is for the overlay work or street resurfacing, as it's sometimes called. The other contract is broken up into 2 pieces here, and that is because it's much more efficient for us to pair one contractor's equipment, labor, time, energy, mobilization to do 2 efforts. So in this case, we have a parks parking lot, specifically Fisher Park, that we paired with this contract to achieve that. So you can see how we broke it.
Mhm.
You have the sheets in front of you that I
Yeah.
think makes it a little clearer. So you can see the 2 program efforts that are contributing to that contract. I can go into further details about the bids and the bid tabs as you see fit. I can also address any questions or concerns you have about the program efforts. Let me know how you'd like to proceed.
Yes, Councilmember Murphy.
So let me just get, some clarity here. We're not approving the contracts, we're approving the administration's authority to enter into said contracts as opposed to perhaps what we just did with Sandy Cove, where we approved the contract, or we are advancing said contract. I'm new here, so I'm just trying to understand, and have it all live in the right buckets in my brain. So maybe if the administration could clarify that, that would be great.
I can. I think this is maybe a bit of a semantics thing here on accident, but essentially in our contracting language, the requirement is that the council has to give the mayor authorization to execute contracts above certain thresholds.
Got
And is the case for all contracts over a certain dollar threshold. So we're coming to ask for those contracts. In this case, 3 in this Parks and Public Works Committee meeting. So very similar in nature. Obviously, Sandy Cove is more complicated, and pairing it with these two would have been inappropriate.
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, so just to add, because I want to try and hit exactly the question that was asked. So the attachment, you're right, is not a contract. It's a contract summary. The contracts themselves refer to this contract summary and incorporate them. This evidently has been the practice for many years, that this is what is brought forward for contract approvals much of the time. So this is just the consistent practice of, here's the contract summary that gets incorporated into the contract. So the contract will be these terms. And I guess that's what they've been showing council for years, and they're just doing the same thing.
So when the contracts are executed, will they come back? Not necessarily for approval, whatever, just for awareness on part of the committee?
If you'd like,
Yes, Mayor.
if you'd like, we don't normally do that, but there's nothing wrong with doing that. It will simply be these terms though. So there wouldn't be any new information, but if you'd like to see them, of course, you're welcome to.
As far as when they're executed, is that what you're asking for?
No, there's more than just a dollar figure in the contract. There are commitments from the vendor and on our part. It binds us both,
Right.
okay? So, those contracts have often come to this committee, particularly when I was chair, okay? And I wouldn't do a contract that at least I didn't see the bid tab. But having said that, I just like to see and have council aware of the contractual commitments we're doing, in addition to the dollars, just for awareness.
And it also has things like, the fees or charges if we go, if it goes beyond its end project date and things like that. I mean, I realize all that. And
Right.
as far as,
What are the termination clauses? And is there an arbitration clause in case something goes wrong? Things like that, just to take a look, be aware. Mayor has his hand up.
yes, Mayor.
Yeah, so I asked a similar question because my recollection being on the council is that I remember looking at a lot of contracts. My understanding, so I asked this question, and my understanding of the answer is that most of our contracts now are, this is how the attorneys describe it, they're on our paper, meaning our standard terms. There is no variance. Every contract has the standard terms that we dictate. Now, some contracts are more complex, such as Sandy Cove, and those will be their own contracts with their own terms. So it's my understanding from the legal department is that when it's on our paper, you get the summaries like you saw attached here, because they're all the standard terms and conditions that we dictate, and the only thing you need to know what the contract looks like is to know that summary, and then just know the name of the contractor and the amount. And so that's evidently why they went to this practice.
And that was what was, the two contracts, program contracts that were included were exactly the same, except for the
Liquidated damages.
Dollar amount and name.
dollar amount. Yeah, it was highlighted what was going to be filled in that would be different. I totally get that part of it.
So, and just to try and address, hopefully, the thought that remained, at least in my mind, when I was asking a similar question to what Councilmember Holloway's asking is, okay, well, wait a minute. Then if a contract is different, it's not on our paper, then my understanding is, no, we would bring that contract to you.
Yes. Councilmember.
So I think just to get some clarification here, the reason we're pursuing this path, well, I guess perhaps one of the reasons would be to expedite, perhaps take what we may consider a extra step out of the process to enter into these contracts quicker to get these projects moving faster? Is that like, I'm just trying to understand some of the rationale behind this new process.
Did
Or-
you have a comment?
I'll wait if that's okay.
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, so this is not a new process. This is what's been going on for years. The only thing that's new about what you're seeing is that we put two contracts on the same agenda bill instead of bringing two separate agenda bills. So that's the thing we're trying to streamline. But in terms of the attachments and the contracts themselves, this has been a practice that's been followed for years. And so to sort of get at the question of why are you showing us these summaries instead of the contracts themselves? The answer is the contracts are all identical, except for the items in this summary that you see with the dollar amount and the contractor name. So that would, I guess the thought is that really doesn't serve any purpose. You've seen these standard contracts, you know what's in them. There's nothing different in there for you to review. Therefore, it's just sort of in essence, a waste of time. Here's the dollar, here's the things that are different that you would be approving because they're different than the standard. And again, now, if the contract's not on our paper, now it could have all kinds of things in it. That's a different thing. Then we would bring that to you so you could see that.
Project Manager Gamble.
I was just actually going to use some of the terminologies and keep you in alignment with the phrases that we have maybe used in the past, just for convenience. We sometimes call that component of the contracting details the front ends, and that oftentimes every time ends up in the bid. So the bidders have this too. It's a very standard practice to include all the details of our front ends, bids, as you've seen them. The bidders all saw them as well. And so that's why they're very standardized, because we can't be changing dramatically the kind of details between the bidders, obviously, and then across different projects and times. And then that's what we do for bids. There are other contract types that do get more complicated. For example, not using bids, we don't use the same front end details. We might use a small works contract that has different requirements, and that would follow a different set of procedures. So I just want to make sure I was saying the same phrases you might have heard and used before. Yeah, and then liquidated damages is what happens if we exceed our contract timeline.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
Appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
all right, let's move this forward on non-consent. And then lastly, we're seeing our, the AB 26040, the 27 to 33 Transportation Improvement Plan. The tip is back, and it's not the STIP, it's the tip. Did we get the advertising, the public hearing in time?
Yes, we did.
All right. And so we're on track for the June 30th deadline?
Yes, we are. Yeah. The public hearing is planned for the 22nd. Let me check
Next
my dates.
Monday.
Yes. Okay. The 22nd of June, which is the next council meeting following this week. So yes, we are prepared to go, and we'll meet the deadlines. Assuming that council approves the document, of course, but yes, we're on time to achieve it.
Okay. Unless there's any questions, I'm going to say, let's move this forward on non-consent. All right. And then any items for discussion? Other items? Have you had enough? Is that-
Had enough, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Items for future discussion. Do council members have anything? I definitely want to keep on there as a recurring item, evacuation routes, the brick evacuation routes, we had some discussion previously as far as some of the resources available for the city as far as determining building a resilient infrastructure community and some resources for that. So I definitely want to keep that going so that the mayor is reaching out to several of the potential product, providers and assistance for this. So we'll definitely see what we might be able to obtain as far as funding and things like that going forward. All right, well, there's nothing else. Anybody care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, we'll be adjourned at 17:50 hours. Thank you.